Good afternoon, and welcome to the MIT Career Lunch and Learn webinar series. My name is Ellen Stahl, and I head up the Alumni Career Programs here at the Alumni Association, and will serve as host and moderator for today's workshop. Our webinar is being broadcast live, and we'll be collecting questions from you throughout the presentation. Please type your questions in the chat box on the lower right side of the WebEx window. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded and available 1 week from today on our YouTube channel. A few technical notes. We have approximately 500 people in our online audience today, but don't worry, you're all muted and can only ask questions and participate via the chat box or Q&A box on the lower left side of your screen. Our presentation today is Strategic Resumes. This webinar is scheduled from 12 to 1. We will hear from our presenters until about 12:40-ish, at which time we will open our Q&A portion of the program. Please type your questions in the chat box at any time during the webinar. You do not need to wait until the Q&A segment. Before we get started, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our presenters today. We're fortunate to have with us some true resume specialists. Dapo Bakare is an alumnus with a dual degree, MBA and Master's of Science in 2010, has 10 years of tech experience. Prior to co-founding his company, Career Muse, Dapo spent 4 years at Amazon as a senior product manager, where he helped drive recruitment for their e-commerce platform division. Before Amazon, Dapo started a tech company through MIT Legatum Fellowship in Nigeria, established a nonprofit, which was the winner of MIT's IDEA competition in Ghana, and worked another 4 years as an engineer at Intel. Stephanie Smith is co-founder of Career Muse, started her career out as a technical recruiter, quickly growing into strategic client management for Modus, an Adecco company leading recruiting and sales programs for Fortune 500 clients, including Amazon. She screened thousands of resumes and helped hundreds of candidates get into contract and full-time roles. Stephanie and Dapo, welcome, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Good morning, everyone on the West Coast, and good afternoon, everyone on the East Coast. It's a pleasure to speak to you all today. Really excited to get to speak with fellow alums as well as current students. It's kind of exciting to be back virtually on the MIT campus speaking to you about resume writing. It's a topic that I've found very, very interesting and fascinating, and decided to spend my career doing it further. It's one of those things that spurred from having transitioned into different careers. As I mentioned, I've transitioned from nonprofit to tech to finance and a whole bunch of different areas in between. As I've transitioned from different roles, the key thing that's helped me sell myself to different companies has been how I've been able to articulate myself and speak to my areas of strengths in a very concise way. Today, I look forward to sharing those tips, both from a person that's been an applicant as well as from the hiring manager perspective, who have had to recruit both at Amazon and in prior companies. And we'll be going through a lot of those detailed tips for you today. I'm joined by Stephanie.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here presenting to you guys today. As I've grown in my career as a recruiter, I've seen, as Ellen mentioned, thousands of applicant resumes and helped hundreds of candidates get into roles with Fortune 500 companies. One of the things that I noticed across my career was that more than 95% of resumes truly need work and don't really encompass the strengths and the achievements that these candidates bring to the table. There are some hard truths that we wanted to share with you guys today, and one of those is that, we've looked at so many resumes, and as much as we like to think that we're strong writers, we're not resume writers by trade. Well, Dapo and I are, but most resumes are just not that great, not that strong. The the goal of the resume is not to get you a job. It's truly to get Dapo as a hiring manager, me as a recruiter to call you. And me as a recruiter and Dapo as a hiring manager are looking for reasons to reject you. It's better to reject than to hire poorly. So it's really important that you really showcase your skills, your impact, your relevancy on your resume, and make it count. Make that first impression count. Recruiters look at resumes, since they're looking at hundreds per day, they spend about 6 to 30 seconds on average skimming through your resume. So if you can't stand out within that short period of time, you're losing to the stiff competition that's out there. So it's important as you go through your resume to really think about who is reading my resume, what are their goals, and what's an effective deliverable to be able to really capture your essence as a job seeker, what you bring to the table, and how that value will be articulated to the company to serve their problems and their needs.
Great. And so with that, we created a course. So in the spirit of MIT, and because deep down inside I always want to teach a course at MIT, I created one for today called Course Res. It's Resume Engineering for 2016. And in this brief lunch and learn, we'll be covering topics related to how to really push your resume to the next level. Some additional housekeeping rules. If you at any point during the conversation have to drop out or anything like that, I want to be able to make ourselves accessible. If you guys liked our presentation or have any other feedback, feel free to send us an email at ben@askcareermuse.com. Ben is on the line waiting to, receive your feedback and your comments and things like that. So that's just another avenue for you to reach us or comment to us. So with that, let's get started. So the overview of today, we're going to cover 3 basic areas, and we broke them into 3 strategic points. The first one is about being concise. The second, relevant, and the third, impactful. As I've gone through my career and transitioned, these are kind of concepts that I've used to help me stand out. And these are concepts that we want to share with you today. It's about being concise in the sense of making sure that you're putting in the right information, because as a hiring manager, if it's too long, I may not pay attention. If it's not relevant to the role I have, I may put it aside. If it's not impactful, I may move on to someone else. So with that, let's start with the first aspect of the overview, be concise. I found this cartoon particularly hilarious as the individual is just scribbling around, getting everything about themselves on a resume. And that's something we don't want to do. I found myself, when applying to jobs, having so much of my experience I want to put out on the resume, but having to hold myself back from it. And so what I've done is I created another resume folder and box with all my resumes, everything else I've done. And then from that, I then pull out the ones that are more relevant to the job. That way I still have the stuff that I'm very proud of doing somewhere, and then I can focus on the parts that are more interesting to the hiring manager. Now, as a hiring manager, it's important to take that perspective because they spend seconds. I spend seconds, and research have shown they spend seconds looking at this. So we aim to have a short resume that really hits the point, helps you make it easier for that hiring manager to view your resume. So I'll transition to Stephanie, who will walk you through some tips and further examples to be concise.
This day and age, we are receiving information, data overload from every angle. So the shorter your resume, the better. Truly, the resume golden standard and is 2 pages. And if you can, even shorten that to 1 page, just encompassing your achievements and the value that you created at the companies you previously worked for, that's even better. Minding the white space is truly important. Even if you can shorten your resume by shrinking the font to a size that's maybe not even readable by a hiring manager, having a resume that has text from side to side from one margin to the other margin is still not acceptable. It's still extremely difficult for someone to skim through. And I want to really stress that point, is your resume is being skimmed through. So you want to make sure that the important information, and we'll get to that, impactful information and relevant information is what you're showcasing there. As you're going through and trying to mine that white space, a really important thing to do is to rephrase the information that you have on there. As we move into the next slide, we'll show you how to do that. Another piece to keep in mind is your most recent experience is the most important experience. It's the experience above the fold. What's on that first page is really what matters the most. It's what is going to be seen. So making sure that you stress what you were doing and the achievements that you've made in the last 5 years, that should be a big focus for you. Not to deflect from the great things that you've done previously in your career. That is also important too, but really showcasing the highlights there and trimming that old experience. As much as we're all proud of what we did 20 years ago, what you did in the 90s does not need to be on your resume. And so one of the things that we recommend you do as you're looking through your experience is really, and try to shorten it and fit it onto 1 or 2 pages, is really trim out that older content. Awards that you received in the early 2000s, unless there's something really significant about that award, a hiring manager wants to see why you're getting awards in the last 5 years, not the last 10 years. They may even question why you haven't continued to achieve, to get recognition. Another piece to keep in mind is fragments are okay on resumes. There's no need for filler words like the, and, by, of. So you can go through and scrape those out and really shorten the phrases that you have on your resume so it's easy for someone to capture, so you're creating that white space. Another couple of items that I'd want you to pay attention to is also removing things that aren't relevant to hiring managers. Your objective should be a summary of your experience, really encapsulating who you are, what you bring to the table in a way that's relevant to that hiring manager. Other things like your address, a header or a footer, not that you don't want your contact information, but headers and footers don't have a place on a resume and actually do not work well with ATS systems. So by removing those, you can actually create some more space for yourself and include more white space so that your resume is visibly easy to read. Also going back to bullet points and how you map out that information, bullet points shouldn't be more than 2 lines. If you can have a bullet point that has just 1 line of an achievement, that's the strongest bullet point you're going to have. Every additional line you put on there loses focus. So if you can shave those bullet points to be 1 or 2 lines max, that's going to be a stronger statement on your resume. So we're going to go to the next slide and kind of show you how to do this. So this is an example of, it's an achievement statement. This is something great that someone's done, but as you can see, it's 4 lines. That's too much information. Someone has to actually read that to get to the information that you're trying to convey, the important meat there, that you cut expenses by 30%. So the first thing I do when I go through resumes is shave out those filler words. So cutting out the the that, you have to modify some things, but once you cut that out, you still don't have a ton of room. Now you need to start rephrasing. Negotiated and launched sounds like that's something that you pioneered. So by cutting out and rephrasing things, new workflow platform with leading technology providers. Those 2 pieces right now are taking up about half of that whole statement, and they're not impactful. So let's keep going here. Pioneered best-in-class workflow solution, cutting expenses 30% and boosting system performance. Now that's a solid 2 lines, but we've got that last piece with and stability. That's eating up an extra line of space on your resume, and it's not necessary. It's what we call a widow or an orphan. And as you go through your resume and look at the information that you have there, looking for bullet points that are 1 to 2 lines, maybe you have a third that just has a word. You need to shave those off, and figuring out how to rephrase those statements so that you can pull out the other pieces like that is going to make your resume a lot more concise. So we'll shave that, we'll remove that orphan, and voila, you've got a nice two-line bullet point that really focuses on what you did there, pioneering a best-in-class workflow solution. Now, we all know that we're not necessarily going after the same role that we were in previously. We may be transitioning to another role, advancing to the next step in that career path. So another thing to keep in mind when you're going through your information is how can you tailor those bullet points? If you're going after a project management position, being able to pioneer something is really important. You're implementing that. But what if you're managing operations? Then something like slashing expenses, 30%, is something that you want to really showcase on the front end of that statement. So it's as simple as turning that statement around, pulling the back end of the statement to the front so that they can see that you slashed those expenses and they don't have to read about the other piece. Will you be selling in that role? Then you want to talk about how you negotiated. So really thinking about what is important to that audience and then curating your statements in a concise way to showcase how that really solves what they're looking, what their problem is and what they're looking for you to do coming on board in that role.
Thanks, Stephanie. So those are some detailed ideas around being concise. Again, the focus is on really putting that relevant information out there and looking at different interesting ways of chopping out the content to make it easier to read. Now on this slide, kind of a cartoon I thought was also funny, going back to being relevant, right? Poly trained at 18 months, not something we want to have in our resume, obviously, but the point here is you want to leave out things that are really early on in your career. And so you want to focus on what the manager really wants to hear that's relevant for his job. And as a hiring manager, that's important to me, because if someone comes in and tells me about some interesting role they did, but it has nothing to do with the role I have, then I'm like, okay, that's great. So you sold XYZ to X number of people, but I'm looking more for a person to manage a project. So for me, yes, it can help with part of the selling piece, but I'll be worried whether or not this person will come in and really handle my project to the quality level I need it to. So again, it's all about pitching yourself to make sure it's really relevant to the audience. And yeah, with that, I'll hand it over to Stephanie to kind of give you some more tips and some more examples about how to be relevant.
All right, so as much as we'd all love to have just one resume for every job that we want to apply to, that's just not the case this day and age. It's really important to have multiple variations, different flavors of your resume. So if you're targeting a role, for example, a product manager, and you're targeting a product marketing manager, those resumes are going to speak to 2 different things. Even more so if you're going after an entirely different industry. So it's really important that you don't have one resume that you apply to. You're going to really limit yourself if you're not showcasing relevant experience to each of those target roles. Another thing to do as you're looking through relevancy is making sure that the most important information comes to the top. And by bringing it to the top, I'm talking about in your summary, what are those, how are you matching with the jobs that you're applying to? If you have 10 years of experience, but you only have 4 years of project management experience, you're going to want to focus on your project management experience if you're applying to a PM role. So prioritizing that content, if you have some achievements that you can lace up there and bring even up to the top of your resume underneath your summary that really showcase the projects that you won. Maybe you delivered them on time or under time by 2 or 3 weeks. Or you saved a lot of money on a project that's very similar to what that next company that you're targeting is working on. You want to bring that information as close to the top of the resume as possible so that a recruiter doesn't have to have any questions about why you wouldn't be able to come in to this role and do the same thing. Showcasing transferable skills, we're all not advancing into that same career path that we started in. So being able to capture the important things that you did and how that translates into that next opportunity is important. And we'll talk about some of those key things in a second here. But optimization and this day and age, SEO, search engine optimization, this is the same thing for resumes. We hear all the time about the resume black holes that exist. And it does exist, but one of the things that you can do to counter that is to really lace your resume with keywords and phrases from the jobs that you're targeting. So my advice for you as you're creating those multiple variations of your resume is figure out those target roles that you're looking for, and then look for job descriptions. Look for companies and job descriptions that really interest you and engage you. And as you're looking through those job descriptions, pull out the pieces of information that you know that you've got similar experience in, that those transferable skills that you possess will be able to speak to. And as you're going through your resume, make sure that it's filled with those keywords and phrases. The more that you have words and material that mirrors what's on that job description, the more searchable your resume is going to be when a recruiter is going out and doing their Boolean search. Another thing to keep in mind there is you can also, not that you want to completely lie about your job title, but you can modify your job title to really speak to that particular area of focus that you had in that role. So say you were doing business analysis and project management as a blended role and you're going after BA roles. You want to focus on that BA experience and you don't need to have the TPM title or the PM title tied to it. So going through your job titles and making sure that those also speak to what that next career path, that next job target is important. Transferable skills, leadership, organizational management, those are really important things that you can really showcase on your resume. Did you initiate new ideas? How did you coordinate tasks? Did you manage groups? Management really carries over across a lot of industries, across a lot of roles, being able to delegate responsibility, teach, coach, counsel. How did you manage change? Change management is something that happens in every organization. So if you can really showcase how you did that, even if it was in an entirely different business model or industry, you're still creating a way of being able to take employee base and transition them effectively. Selling ideas or products, those types of things are all going to fall under that leadership piece. Then communication. Have you done any keynote speaking? Have you presented? What large presentations have you done? How large was the audience? What were those topics you were talking about? Facilitating group discussions or leadership meetings, being able to negotiate and persuade. Those are all really important things that you can showcase on your resume that show that you have strong communication skills. Research and planning is another one. Being able to forecast and predict. Being able to come up with ideas, identify problems and potential alternatives, to be able to gather information and solve problems, and define needs and roles, using analysis and evaluation strategies to really make an impact. And then there's the human relations piece, which is always important. How do you motivate people? How do you assert yourself? Did you delegate? Who did you delegate to? How many direct reports did you have? And then just basic work survival. Did you implement decisions? How did you cooperate? Collaboration is critical to any organization. So if you can highlight who you were collaborating with and what you were collaborating on and how you were able to come to a consensus, that's really important. Accepting responsibility, setting deadlines, organizing, decision-making. All those things are transferable skills. And as you're going through, and we'll go to the next slide, as you're brainstorming, think about when and where you've actually been able to do those things to show those attributes that are transferable. If you've done that for a related industry, a related project or initiative, that's huge. How did you use those skills to solve problems and challenges that may be similar to that role that you're targeting? Perhaps that company has the same mission as a company that you worked for previously, but in a completely different space. You can still speak to those things and highlight your experience in a way that shows how you brought those transferable skills to the table. Technologies and solutions. It's always easier to have someone coming in that's worked with the same tools and platforms. The ramp-up time is going to be significantly lower if you don't have to teach somebody a whole new system. So being able to highlight how you use those tools and what results were created from them, that's great too. So just a great place to be relevant is really in your summary, the first thing that a recruiter sees on your resume. And this summary right here, I call this a week one. Expertise in print and digital advertising for government, healthcare, manufacturing, and e-commerce industries. Seeking a role where I can apply these skills to build brand awareness. Well, that doesn't really say anything to me about what you've done previously. This is a stronger summary. For someone that's looking to work at a company like Amazon, being an adaptable leader is important, being able to work in an ambiguous environment. How many years of experience do you have in this area too? That's a really great way of showing your experience. What type of audience were you serving? What was your client base? B2C in this example. And as you can see, we cut out all those other industries that this person had experience in because Amazon isn't looking for that. They're looking for e-commerce industry experience. And what has this person done? They could say that they have, being able to be recognized for something is a lot stronger than just explaining something that you've done. So recognized for securing stakeholder approval to launch multi-million-dollar digital ads. And what did that result in for the company? Significant market capture. You want to show results even in that summary statement. What are the trends in your career that you've seen? What are the results that you've produced? And how is that experience relevant?
Right. So that's really a lot of detail about how you can be more relevant to a role. Lots of good feedback there. And the key thing that we want to stress is to be relevant, you have to look at the job description and cater your resume towards that. And as Stephanie mentioned, the summary is where you want to do all that, because that summary really can tie in the job and kind of make things clear for the hiring manager. So in this slide, I mean, it's just a funny one where we talk about when the hiring manager is there looking at a person and just wants to know what they brought. And that's something that I care about when someone submits their resume to me, is that what's the impact that they've made, how they made that impact, how they really like shown themselves to really be better than other people around them or other people that they've worked with. So that's kind of the key area to have there. One thing to note in my experience is I've kind of gone through and done my resume. One thing that's helped me a lot is I create a spreadsheet of the different things I've accomplished and create a ranking of like, okay, how is this accomplishment related to the company? How is this accomplishment impactful? How is this accomplishment short and concise? That way I can basically allow me to like organize all the information and really focus on the ones that really are strong and impactful. So again, I will pass it on to Stephanie to talk to you about things that tips and the days that she has on ways you can make yourself totally rock your resume writing.
So it's not just enough to be relevant, it's really important to make an impact. And making an impact is being able to transform the things that you've done on your resume into results. So when we go through resumes, we really look at the content that our users, that our customers have, and think about in the back of our minds, what problem was this customer, what is this candidate solving? What did they do? What was this task all about? What was the purpose of that task, and what did it result in for the company? That's how you create impact. Everything you do creates impact for a company. So being able to go through your resume, look at all those things you do, and the important ones that you're able to produce results for, those are the ones that you want to showcase on your resume. Being able to quantify data points is really important. If you looked at this slide and you see that 100% of the time, I know my eyes are drawn to that. Data points speak louder than words on resumes, and recruiters' eyes, hiring managers' eyes are immediately drawn to those points. It doesn't always have to be a percentage of an increase or a decrease. It could be how many people did you manage? What was the time frame in which you were able to get something done? Those types of elements, if you can include that level of detail in your resume, it substantiates the information you have more than what you're going to see on a lot of other resumes that managers are looking at, which look like a list of tasks and responsibilities. Most resumes look like job descriptions. So if you can include strong data points and things that really speak to and underscore the statements that you have on your resume, that's going to make you a much more solid candidate. That's what's going to get you that call back. So an easy way of doing that is really looking at your experience and thinking about it from the STAR or CAR approach. This is also a great approach to think about as you're going through your interview prep and interview structure as you're going through that interview process. So thinking about the situation task, what was the action that you took? What was the result? Being able to capture that on the resume, really focusing on how did you solve that problem? What did you do to solve it? And what did that create in terms of impact for the company? I can't highlight this enough. This is one of the most important things that you should be doing on your resume is making those relevant statements impactful. And then once you're able to do that, really activating that content with powerful verbs. As you saw earlier on the example that I showed, negotiated and implemented, those aren't bad words, but pioneered is a much stronger, much more powerful verb. So we've got some great documents that actually include that. If you're interested, feel free to send us an email. We're happy to send you that document that lists all the different verbs that you could plug in for different things like managed or led, negotiated. And now we're just going to show you how to impact brainstorm. So as you're going through each of your experiences, looking at what did you create or design, what did you implement or improve. As we spoke about earlier in transferable skills, these are things that really translate over across all different types of roles. So if you can showcase those, you're really showcasing those transferable skills. So ask yourself those questions, but not just asking those questions. Ask yourself, what were the results of those creations? Why did you create or design those things, and what happened? What changed? Again, going back to what problems did this solve? What was the most beneficial difference you made on your team, on your organization, with your clients? Those things are really important to showcase. Did you make any recommendations that were adopted? It could be as simple as, hey, I just found this great tool that I've been using to make my life a little bit easier for me to manage my time better, and sharing that with your team. And all of a sudden that's adopted by the team and everyone's collaborating in a different way and things are running much more efficiently. Think back upon when you received recognition for your work. Why did you receive that recognition? And then again, as we talked about earlier, mentoring and training others. that's something that if you have the skills to be able to mentor somebody, managers are going to want to talk to you. So before and after, follow lean processes and procedures to reduce engineering and operating costs. That's still not strong enough. You want to keep the powerful verbs in there, slashed operating costs. What did you slash it by? So quantify that. You implemented processes and procedures. How many did you implement? And what was that time frame? In 3 months. All of a sudden, that boring statement turns into something that's much more powerful and speaks to the specifics of what you did.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. So one of the things that we want to ensure that you take away from this is that things are different now. Now it's not just about your resume as a hard document, but it's also about your profile that you create online. So you take all this feedback and you apply those to different aspects of your online presence, whether it's your LinkedIn profile, your social media profiles, your personal websites. That way you create a consistent theme around who you are, people that are viewing, and it also makes your statements about yourself stronger. So you want to include that on your LinkedIn profile and social media as well.
Also make sure that you're including those links on your resume, hyperlinks so that they can click. You're no longer just a piece of paper. A recruiter can jump in and click on your LinkedIn profile and see who you are, what you look like, who you know, who they're connected with, and you have a stronger way of getting looked at. The more places that you have your information, the more opportunity those recruiters and hiring managers have to find you.
Exactly, because in LinkedIn, one of the things they do when they're trying to show ads to users is they look at the keyword in your resume, in your LinkedIn profile to figure out whether or not to share ads with you. So by lacing your LinkedIn profile with relevant keywords, you also get yourself easier noticed. Again, this is not limited to LinkedIn. You also have, for those who are developers, a GitHub profile. If you have a good Twitter handle following and you're going to a marketing arena, Twitter following, but all those key things you can add to your resume to really help you stand out. Now, some closing tips.
Diversify your job search. Do not put all of your eggs in one basket. We highly recommend that you take your awesome resume once you've gone through the tips that we've shared with you, and don't just apply to jobs. Use your network, use LinkedIn, get your resume directly into the mailbox of the decision makers so that you have a leg up on the competition that's not doing that. Also, make sure you're using an ATS-friendly format. If you're sending a PDF into an online application, that's going to get jumbled. Same thing happens if you're using templates, if you're using visuals, if you're using graphs and charts. On the recruiting end, all of that information gets jumbled, and you just look like a pile of words that I can't ascertain. So making sure that you use an ATS-friendly format, and it goes without saying proofread. Managers will, if you simply forget to punctuate the right way, you will cut yourself out of an opportunity. So I can't stress that enough. And don't forget to show how awesome you are by following our tips.
Great. So in conclusion, we want you to cry, be concise, be relevant, and be impactful. We want the resume, hiring manager to see yours and basically have that expression about how beautiful it is. So we want, again, as we mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Some things that we're up to. So one of the interesting things that we are doing right now is we're working on software and AI to actually do everything we just shared with you. And we're launching that on Indiegogo in the next few weeks. To help you, if you're looking to get your resumes spruced up sooner, we'll be having a Google Hangout for resume review for MIT alums, November 1st. So sign up today to get a spot. As we heard, there were hundreds of people that joined this call, so please email ben@askcareermuse.com to reserve a spot, to find out more about what we're up to learn about the AI software, and even to get tools and tips. There are a couple of cool tools that we found to help you pull out keywords from resumes, as well as more examples of powerful, impactful statements. So thank you again for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you all and really sharing our experiences, my experiences, from being a resume writer to a hiring manager to now being a resume consultant, as you will. So with that, we'll open up for questions, and I'll pass it on to Ellen.
Thank you both so much. That was a lot of information, really excellent. I know that people have been typing in. Thank you so much. Things were great. I know some people might have had other things to do and to drop off, but we held pretty steady in our excellent attendance. Yes, we've recorded today. Yes, you will be able to view the recording next week on our YouTube channel, which is available on the MIT Alumni Association website. People have asked as well if the slides would be available. I will defer to you both as to whether or not that's something. If people contact you at the email address that I see at the bottom of the slide, ben@askcareermuse.com. If that's something that people can contact you and request, I will leave that to your decision. But let's get to some questions, because we've had them coming in throughout the presentation, lots of excellent ones. Obviously, we won't be able to get to all 500 of your questions. But let's start with this first one that I think might help sort of a lot of people that are attending today. Do you feel that this advice that you've given will be different for people that are outside of the United States?
So it varies quite a bit. You definitely want to cater to your audience. Most of the advice we're giving, while it is focused on the U.S. market, it is relevant for the markets that you're going after. Again, the problem still lies is that hiring manager has a lot of things to do, and as much as you can stay concise, relevant, impactful, you can really stand out. With things like online submissions, most companies across the globe use similar systems, not just U.S. companies. So the advice we gave is also relevant there to get you through that first round of filters.
I'd say the more impactful your resume, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, the stronger your resume is going to be. I do know in other countries, they do not have the same parameters that we have around length on resumes. So going back further into your experience in the 90s may be more acceptable in other countries than what we see here in the U.S. But really, in general, you know, time is of the essence, and competition is steep wherever you are. So the more that you can take these tips, the more of a leg up you're going to have on candidates in those other countries that may not necessarily be following this process. And this is really a process that is across the board, for medical professionals to executives. This process is what, you know, people pay thousands of dollars for someone else to write their resume to really create. So if you can follow these tips and really work through your experience and think about it in this light, you're going to have a resume that stands out from most people, like I said, that have resumes that look like job descriptions.
Great. Another popular question this afternoon was, how do you deal with gaps in your employment? So whether that was somebody who worked for several years and then took a career pause, perhaps to raise a family or to care for a sick parent, et cetera, not necessarily due to unemployment. How do you talk about that in your resume, and how best to capture that, since there tends to be a lot of or people feel somewhat discrimination about those gaps?
Yeah, that's one that we've encountered quite often in our role, and even one that I've encountered personally. So one of the things I've done when I've had gaps is just to include projects or entrepreneurial things that I've started up. So whether it's, you start off doing a product to sell something or you're going to build something, really highlighting those as entrepreneurial experiences that you've had helps you out. Now, there's also another area that can be done with your resume, which is to change its format. So most resumes right now have a chronological time-based format. You can change it to one that's more functional of a resume, and that can help you really speak to the areas of strengths rather than the timeline of things that you did.
Another piece that I'd recommend, so functional resumes is what Dapo is referring to, and that really focuses on transferable skills, kind of pulls those key things, leadership, communication, to the forefront, and then your experience falls underneath it, so it deflects. The challenge is recruiters look at that and hiring managers look at that, and if they're not seeing dates on your resume, they start to, unfortunately, it's guilty until proven innocent in the hiring space. So I do recommend making sure that you do list out at the very least, the years. So maybe you have some gaps that can be hidden with that by going from months, and I recommend having months as much as possible unless you have gaps, to just showcasing the years. Another thing is, say you took some time off to focus on your family or take care of a sick family member. You can put a little note there, and so you don't have to put a description on your resume, but really just put this date to this date, caretaker, family caretaker. So you're plugging in that hole. There's no question why there's a hole. You have just a little line in there about what you were doing during that time frame that will remove any red flags that somebody has when they're looking at that gap. And going back to what Dapo said, if you're taking time off and you've done things like volunteering or serving on the board or a committee, you can also use those projects or volunteer experiences to plug into your resume and really speak to what were some of the impactful things that you did in that volunteer position. So those are just some strategies that you guys can use to plug in those holes. I, again, advise more so against functional resumes because it's hard for people to see what you're actually doing in the experiences that you do have. But if you use the tips that we shared with you, you should be able to counter most of those objections.
Great. And would a cover letter help in that instance, or do recruiters just not read cover letters anymore?
It varies. I mean, from my perspective, I do look at cover letters that come to me, but it all depends on how you're submitting the resume. So if you're meeting someone in person, it's your words that go through. If you submit it online, there's a requirement to put a cover letter, definitely put it in. But for the most part, I think a lot of people first look at the resume and then read the cover letter. That's what I've done in the past. And so, yeah, your cover letter can do it, but I don't want to spend most of the space or the text you have on your cover letter explaining gaps. I'd rather use it to just kind of really put some more context into the things that you've done. So it's more about giving more information about your strengths rather than spending time explaining weaknesses.
And on the cover letter front, it's, following the same strategy that you take with your resume. Don't have a one-size-fits-all cover letter. If you're spending time creating a cover letter, make sure that's crafted and directed towards a particular company, even more so a particular person. So if you're really being targeted and you want to talk to a recruiter or a hiring manager, look at what they've been doing. Have they been speaking anywhere? Have they posted any publications on LinkedIn, articles that you thought were interesting? You want to be able to tie those things into a cover letter to show that you're not just blindly sending out generic cover letters, but you're really taking the time to understand who your audience is, how your experience is going to solve their problems, and be direct about it. So I think having a cover letter that speaks to those things, and if you're sending it directly, if you're emailing people directly, having a nice cover letter that's targeted to them isn't a bad thing. Is it an absolute requirement? It really depends on the company.
Exactly.
Great.
But if you spend time, tailor it.
Sure, definitely. So when a candidate is heavy on education and light on, maybe we could say, proven paid experience, how can you make a case for a job application or your resume? And as recruiters in the past, do you feel that paid work trumps classroom or institutional research, or is experience in the eye of a recruiter experience, whether you got paid for it or not?
I think Well, one, it's how you position it on your resume. So if it was an internship, I really like to focus on project work that students have done and highlight, those projects that they were doing have impact too. So following that same strategy that you do with your work experience, somebody looking at that resume won't know whether or not you got paid for that project or not, so that question is less in their mind than what you were actually doing in that project and how that's going to be something that gave you the experience to come in and do that again for me or be able to ramp up really quickly. So again, just goes back to impact and how you can position that, but internships, project work, those things you definitely want to beef up on your resume if you're more heavy on the educational, institutional side.
Exactly. I mean, as a hiring manager, one of the things I'd look at is how do I reduce the risk? How can I hire this person and they'll come on board and I don't have to worry about too much onboarding time or that things may fall apart? So as much as you have education experience, tie in the tools that you worked in, so I know that when this person jumps in on the job, they can handle these tools and use them to get the job done. They have they've worked with others and how they've worked and made product success. It's great. So again, tying back to all the things we mentioned about being relevant and impactful, because while it is educational experience, it is still valuable experience. It's different from work experience, but if you can highlight it with the impact focus, it really helps you stand out.
Yep. Great. So for people that have been working for many years and perhaps have lots of volunteer opportunities, or they've perhaps been on boards where they've had great impact and leadership experience, however it might be what they feel some may seem as controversial. So perhaps it's with a political organization or a religious organization or anything dealing with LGBTQ. So for them, it's something that they're very proud of, that they feel would be able to show great experience for them. How do you suggest that somebody put that on their resume, and what are your feelings about that?
I think it boils down to the type of company you're going after. There are a couple of good companies out there that have really an open mindset to what they're looking for. So if you're going to an environment where it's kind of something it's not part of their culture, their DNA, then honestly you don't want to even be in that company anyway, right? So it's about you, it's a key part of you, and if it's something that's uncomfortable, if you don't show your resume, it's going to come out while you're at work, and if for you it's almost like a little bit of a filtering mechanism, because it lets you filter out companies that wouldn't be a good fit for you anyway. So that's kind of how I think about it, is that you want to make sure that it's the right fit. Now with other things that maybe, I think it all varies. It's one of those that's very hard topic, and it's more of a case-by-case basis. But I'd say if you've done something impactful, put it out there and share it with the employer. Have any comments?
My comment would be just exercise, practice judgment as you're building that into your resume. One, make sure, the amount of space it's taking up. You really want to make sure you're focusing on your work experience and getting that focus versus listing, because you only have 2 pages. If you have half a page of volunteer experience, they're going to question, okay, I want to see what this person was doing in their actual work experience. But I think that you don't also want to create any questions. You don't want to create any doubt. So I just think be mindful. In my opinion, just be mindful of your audience. And if it's an audience that you feel like is going to be more open-minded, like Dapo said, keep it on there. If it's something you're truly proud of and you want to make sure that this is encapsulated, we would not say remove it, but just practice judgment. Some more conservative organizations may look at that and have some question marks about you coming in and maybe stirring up some things. So going to Dapo's point, is that a company you want to work for in the first place? Maybe not. But if you think it's going to prevent yourself from getting into that company and you really want to be a part of what they're working on, then removing it from your resume doesn't mean you never did it. You can also keep it on your LinkedIn profile. And LinkedIn's a great place to beef up all those things that you don't have room for on your resume, and also isn't broadcasting things in black and white on that piece of paper. So that's another place where you can kind of toss the things that you don't have space for on your resume into, and somebody that looks at that will see all those achievements once they click on that hyperlink from your resume.
Great. All right, next question. So do employers need to see continuous employment on your resume? What if you have, let's say, 20 years of experience and some of your prior employment is not relevant to your current position, and you don't want to have, as you've suggested, a 3- to 5-page resume? How do you write it so that it doesn't look like you've been unemployed during those periods of time? What sort of language do you recommend?
I think for that, when I've looked at resumes and scanned them from, I basically look at what they've done more recently. So for me, I look at the last 3 roles they had and whether or not those roles serve the purpose for the job I have available. So I don't look at it if I see from, 2016 all the way back to 2010, if I don't see anything earlier than that, I'm not too worried about it because I just believe the person cut that information out to save space and to be more relevant to me, which I appreciate. And then with the education, sometimes that gives me a sense of when they graduate, so that helps as well. But the real key thing that helps too is the summary at the very top, because the summary at the top gives me the years of experience you've had in different industries, and I can then use that as a quick math to say, okay, this person has the breadth or the depth of experience that I need. He has 10 years as a project manager, so it's perfect for me. I may not see all those 10 years, but that's what I assume he did in all those other years as well. So again, the point of it is have your summary statement that speaks to the years of experience you have. You can definitely chop off things that are off there, and it doesn't look messed up. And then with gaps, just as we mentioned again earlier, filling it up with things like projects.
Yeah, I'd say if you're concerned about not having continuous employment because you're pulling things off of your resume, the best thing to do is say you have a couple of gaps that are going to be created by pulling those out. It's not that you need to remove those altogether. It just doesn't need to be a huge focus. So if you can take that experience and really figure out what are the things that I did in that role that actually show the transferable skills that would carry over to this role that you're now targeting, and just have, maybe one sentence and an achievement, or just an achievement there. That still shows that you have continuous employment. It's not taking up a ton of space on your resume, but, it doesn't prevent any questions coming up from what was this person doing from this year to this year. So again, going back to impact and relevancy, because in those roles you're still doing things that would be leadership-based, organizational management, showing communication skills. So going back to that and thinking about what you did there that would transfer over, and just having a very short piece about it, I think is fine.
So thank you both again so much. This has been excellent. We could probably have another hour of just questions. You remind, because they're still coming in, and I apologize for not being able to get to everybody. We remind everybody again about the Google Hangout and how they can sign up for that?
Yes, so Ben at Ask Career Muse, Ask, A-S-K, Career, C-A-R-E-E-R, and Muse, M-U-S-E.com. You can send us your questions there. We might not be able to get to all of it today, but our goal is we'll be able to read through them and address them over the coming few days, weeks. And then we have the Google Hangouts November 1st, 2016, and all we ask is just you send us kind of a copy of your resume beforehand so we can better slot things in.
And to answer your question earlier, Ellen, we are happy to send out the slide deck to whoever is interested in taking a look at that. And we'll also be sending out a list of powerful verbs for anyone that does email us as well. So email Ben at askcareermuse.com, AskCareerMuse.com, and we'll send you out the PowerPoint, the powerful verbs, and answer any questions you have. And then again, on November 11th, our Google Hangout.
November 1st.
November 1st. Sorry about that.
One thing to note with the slides, unfortunately, we'll have to take off the cartoons.
Sure.
For copyright reasons, but we'll share
right. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Stephanie and Dapo, thank you again so much for your time and all of your great information and your generous spirit in allowing people to continue to ask questions and receive help on their documents, and my guess is perhaps there will be a part 2 at some point later down the line on this topic. Thank you again, and everyone have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Bye.